The opinions expressed on the following program are strictly those of the guests and do not necessarily reflect the views of WCZT, regional media, coastal broadcasting, personnel, or advertisers. Money Talk with Melanie, brought to you by MrCreditRepair.biz.
Money Talk with Melanie features entrepreneurs, CEOs, and politicos who are experts in their fields. Money Talk with Melanie. Money Talk with Melanie on 98.7 The Coast.
Welcome back to another edition of Money Talk with Melanie. I'm your host, Melanie Collette, broadcasting live from beautiful Wildwood, New Jersey, here on 98.7 The Coast. I have to tell you, I chuckle just a bit every time I hear the disclaimer, which I don't believe started until I partnered with 98.7 The Coast, and I just feel like, in layman's terms, they're like, in other words, we're not responsible for anything that crazy chick from 7 to 9 on Thursdays has to say, or any of her guests. Don't talk to us about that. Talk to her. Tweet her at Money Talk Mel if you're upset with anything she has to say. But that's just my own interpretation. But I am responsible for my own thoughts, my own feelings, and everything I say here on the air. But I am very happy to be back live. I have two wonderful guests this evening. My guest for the 7 o'clock hour is Andi Buerger. She's the founder of Voices Against Trafficking. And we're going to discuss the $160 billion sex trafficking industry. And the reason why I bring this up on Money Talk with Melanie is because of the $160 billion industry. Obviously, that is problematic, and we'll talk to Andi Buerger about that in a few minutes. And you're going to want to hear her story, which is quite compelling, and what she's doing to fight sex trafficking and how we can do something as well. And then in the 8 o'clock hour, I'm going to have Jayson Thornton, otherwise known as JT. He's a certified financial planner and host of the YouTube show Pocket Watching with JT. He's going to expose fraudulent financial influencers, and in particular, there are some that target the black community specifically, which is really upsetting and disheartening, but we'll chat more about that in particular. But there's tons of influencers, black, white, otherwise, green, purple, whatever, that are fraudulent. So we're going to talk about what to look out for and how we know that an influencer may not be all they're cracked up to be. So we'll talk to Jayson Thornton about that. But before we get into that, a couple of news points. You guys probably are aware, if you're looking at the prices of things, that the Fed has been hiking interest rates, and of course that costs all of us more money. Well, the Feds recently had a meeting, and Reuters, the news outlet Reuters, reported on some of the highlights from that meeting. And one of the highlights is that the Federal Reserve says that they saw little evidence last month that inflation was going to go down. That is upsetting to hear, especially when they have been hiking interest rates, and that's supposed to be deflationary. In other words, supposed to be able to bring costs down for us. And so far, the Fed is seeing little evidence that it's doing so. So they want to try to force the economy to slow down and put a control on the surge in prices that's going on. And those minutes were from the July 26th and 27th meeting. Now, they have an upcoming meeting next month, September 20th to 21st, and they're going to, of course, talk about raising interest rates again, but perhaps slowing down the pace in hopes that it will have a deflationary effect on the economy, meaning that it will lower prices across the board as opposed to what we are seeing right now, which is it doesn't seem, the rise in rates don't seem to be having an effect on prices, and that's not a good deal. So just something for you to think about. Also, are you someone who is in the market for an electric vehicle? If so, the tax credits were just revamped, and here's what you need to know according to an article in CNN Business. So the so-called, I'm going to call it so-called, Inflation Reduction Act has big implications on those of you who are interested in buying electric vehicles. They've become more popular. But if you can afford it, right? Like the lowest price EV is about $60,000. And my guess is if you can't afford $5 gas, you probably can't afford a $60,000 vehicle. So some vehicles may become eligible for a tax credit. Once again, while others that were eligible before may not be eligible in the foreseeable future. So that's something to think about. The old credit offered $7,500 for a new electric vehicle. Buyers until their automaker hit the 200,000 limit for available tax credits. Plug-in hybrid buyers received a smaller credit, but the new revamp in the Inflation Reduction Act, I have to laugh when I say that because it's not going to reduce inflation, but I digress. With the new act, the new credit immediately replaces the prior system and removes the 200,000 limit, but it also creates new restrictions that are being phased in related to how they are put together, the batteries that they use, and other supply chain issues. So it's going to be, of course, super complicated because the government doesn't do anything simply at all. Here are some of the requirements that are going to be in effect January 1st, 2023. The vehicle must be assembled in North America. Much of the battery components and the battery minerals have to be constructed in North America. Also beginning in 2023, 40% of the critical minerals used to create the vehicle's battery have to be extracted or processed in the United States or a country that has a free trade deal with the U.S. Very interesting. By 2027, that number is going to be raised to 80% of battery minerals, and the battery component requirement calls for 50% to be manufactured or assembled in North America, starting in 2023, and 60% in 2024 and 2025. They plan on rolling it out and having that grow to 100% in 2029. So very interesting, but one of the things you really want to pay attention to if you're looking for an electric vehicle is that if you get a pickup or an SUV, electronic vehicle, you can't buy one over $80,000, which I think is going to be kind of hard to do because they're very expensive. Other vehicles like sedans can't be over $55,000. And the buyer's income can't exceed $150,000 if you're single, or $225,000 if you're the head of household, or $300,000 if you're married. Those are a lot of restrictions, and I'm not sure any of them are helpful. Anywho, that's what's going on with electronic vehicles. If you're interested in buying one, good for you. You're listening to Money Talk with Melanie. I'm your host, Melanie Collette. Our first guest coming up after the break is Andi Buerger, founder of Voices Against Trafficking. We're going to discuss sex trafficking, a $160 billion industry. We'll be back on the other side of the break.
Money Talk with Melanie, brought to you by MrCreditRepair.biz.
This is important because it's your money. Your money. Money Talk with Melanie. Money Talk with Melanie on 98.7 The Coast.
Welcome back to Money Talk with Melanie. Our first guest is Andi Buerger. She's the founder of Voices Against Trafficking. She's going to discuss with us how sex trafficking is a $160 billion business, which is insane. And we're going to talk about some questions that we have, some facts that people may not know about the industry and why it is even an industry. But a little bit about Andi Buerger before we bring her on. She herself is a survivor who spent the first 17 years of her life subjected to abuse and sex trafficking at the hands of her own family. She has used her experience and passion for this cause to become one of the world's most fearless fighters against human trafficking. Through her organizations, Voices Against Trafficking and Beulah's Place, she has rescued hundreds of innocents from the $160 billion transnational criminal trafficking industry. And I'm very happy to welcome to Money Talk with Melanie, Ms. Andi Buerger.
Well, thanks, Melanie. It's an honor to be here again.
Hi, I'm so happy to have you back. I don't think we've talked to each other or seen each other since CPAC before COVID.
Yes, it's been way too long.
It has definitely been way too long. I'm very happy to have you back on the show. I was shocked to see that sex trafficking was a $160 billion industry. If for no other reason then I noticed, I went back and looked at my notes from when you appeared on the show before, and it has gone up, not down. I think the last time you were on the show was in 2020, and that number has actually gone up.
It has gone up globally, and of that huge number, it's probably about 95 billion that is sex trafficking. Okay, you have labor trafficking, you have sex trafficking, you have trafficking of humans to reduce debts or pay debts and stuff. But basically, it's a depraved nature driving that, as well as greed, and that's why it's so huge.
And that is just, it's sickening, it's maddening. It's nauseating to think that people use other humans in this way. But before we move into that, I think you touched on it a little bit in your last answer. But explain what trafficking is. It's not just sexual in nature, is it?
No, and the simple version, the Andi version, is anytime someone is coerced or forced into an activity against their will, whether it's sexual activity, labor activity, debt payment, things like that, that is trafficking. It's not smuggling. You smuggle someone into different countries, you take them across the border, that's it. But this is actually imprisoning, enslaving. We call it 21st century slavery for a reason, because that victim cannot get out, and most of the time, depending on the extent and the years of trafficking, they don't live long enough, to get out of it. So that is basically what it is. Just like any time something takes the innocence of a child away. So, Melanie, as you know, since the beginning of time, humans have been used in trade for a lot of reasons. Back then, of course, it was labor, but now, unfortunately, without law enforcement, without leaders that say, hey, this is wrong, without civil liberty people showing up and saying, we got to stop this, it has been allowed to run amok.
That's exactly right. And we don't, it seems, at least politically or in our media, that here in the United States, we do not talk about it enough, and we don't really include it in our relationships with other countries. When money's involved, we kind of turn a blind eye to what is going on financially, or, in my opinion, we pick and choose who we're going to talk about and who we're not going to talk about as far as slavery is concerned. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, you're right on it. I just jumped in because that's absolutely it. Instead of saying we are all human beings, no matter what our choices are, no matter what our preferences are, we are all humans, and we all deserve to have our rights and to have ourselves protected, to not be violated, to not be abused and assaulted and attacked, and then to watch predators roam freely without bail or jail sentences, things like that. We should all be focused on our humanity, and we're not. Because, like you said, it seems like there are some people that get protection, some people that don't, some people that won't even listen to people of influence, like gymnasts, Olympic gymnasts who reported and nobody did anything. Where were their rights, being protected? There weren't any.
That's exactly right. And that was stunning that our own government told them to be quiet. That the people who were supposed to be charged with protecting those young girls absolutely did not protect them. And I hope they write them a nice, huge, fat check because of that.
Yes, absolutely. Because as you know, and I know from personal experience, we never outlived the shame. And the recent death of Ann Hetch, same thing. 31 years of abuse and familial abuse and trafficking, exploitation, whatever, all of that stuff together, no amount of money, of fame, of fortune can ever outrun the shame a victim feels their entire life. There are ways, of course, to heal and create new normals like I did, but it is always there. You can never undo that.
That's exactly right. It's like breaking a dish into a million pieces. You cannot put it back together. Now, what's insane are the numbers, the statistics. I read internationally as I was prepping for the show that there are between 20 million and 40 million people in modern slavery today worldwide. And this is according to the United Nations, who says it's really tricky to figure out how many there actually are because it's a hidden figure of crime.
Absolutely. In the United States, we base whatever we do get on reporting, and not many victims are really excited to report, especially after they see people in the news not being listened to, not being protected, not having recompense for what happened. In the other countries, all the other countries around us, our global community, that's exactly it, because nobody wants to upset the gravy train. There's always somebody covering, whether it's higher echelons or we're in Africa or we're in other countries or Mexico. It doesn't matter where we're at. It happens in every country, in every state, whether we want to acknowledge it or not.
That's for sure. And in some countries, it happens legally. In some countries, it's not illegal.
Exactly. It is not. And now we have progressed so far down that rabbit hole that children's organs and young adult organs are being sold, to other countries. So if you have enough money, and let's say you have a kidney problem and you have the right connections, you can actually order a healthy kidney or a healthy, whatever, and somebody will go find it, and they usually abduct the individual. And when they take those organs, Melanie, they don't have the fancy hospitals that most of us think of. It is not a sanitary process. It is a brutal process, and it happens to children, young people, anyone with healthy organs in certain countries is now another business.
That is scary, and it's so upsetting because it just brings you back to, if you have money, almost anything is possible, even, making victims out of other human beings. Absolutely.
It's in my version, it's a different, maybe a different play on cannibalism, really, because you're paying for a person's body. You're not actually eating it, but you're basically killing that person, and you're destroying that person. And I think for listeners out there that have kids or grandkids or nieces and nephews, I think the myth is that, it doesn't happen here, or it can't be that bad. But we know right now, today, as of last week, 1 in 5 kids will be contacted by social media predators. And that 88% of human trafficking or child human trafficking victims originate through the Internet. So who's helping our kids watch what they're doing? Who's helping them vet out, who's teaching them these things? And where are the departments of education and the school boards and the civil liberty unions, for these children? When I was trafficked, school was my safe place. I couldn't wait to get to school because it kept me away from my immediate predators.
Exactly. And, I thought about that as I know a friend of mine on the other side of the country was telling me that they had a professional development thing on trafficking. And I said to myself, it seems to me that the students are the ones who need the professional development on trafficking. Like the kids already, the teachers know, right? About trafficking, but it would seem that we need to teach the kids about how to recognize that kind of thing in their own social media practice. I don't think anybody's trafficking 51-year-old, teachers. I don't think that's...
No, probably not. Not unless they're, in an exceptionally interesting situation. But to your point, one of the great things that I believe we are doing right now, Voices Against Trafficking, is we have partnered with a group called the Paratus Group. And they have a program where in just 4 minutes a day, Melanie, Monday to Friday, 4 minutes a day, a little video that you can discuss with your kids, grandkids, school students, anywhere, mental health clinics, will create a habit of situational awareness that's customized to whoever's watching it. And in 90 days, your loved ones, your colleagues, whoever is watching this and doing this with you, they will have a habit in 90 days. And if they continue with this program that we're going to roll out in September, specifically for back to school and that kind of social circle, they'll be able to have a lifelong awareness to avoid sexual assaults or trafficking, or, to know when they need help if they're feeling suicidal, all those kinds of things, because everyone's circumstance, where you live, where I live, where your viewers and listeners live, that they're all different places. But this is a custom program. We're really excited about this because we want to help the masses learn how to protect and how to be aware, so tragedy doesn't have to hurt your family.
Indeed. And what's wild about this entire industry, is huge as the numbers are, very few people come forward as survivors. identified as somebody who has survived any kind of trafficking. And therefore, these cases go undetected. So I think that's why a lot of people think it's not as huge of a problem as it is.
Exactly. And because the shame, the guilt, I just want to leave it alone. I don't want to think about it. I want to go somewhere else. The 300 plus kids my husband and I rescued, the same story. I don't want to say anything. I just want to keep moving, right? As if you can distance yourself from something that horrific happening to you, whether it's one assault or it's full-on trafficking or it's sexual, physical, mental abuse, any of that. It's all trauma.
Exactly. It is all trauma, and unless you are able to identify it and proactively heal, you're not going to be able to. And the statistic that I read was that only 4% of people who are human trafficked, only 4% of those cases are ever even identified. So, go ahead. I'm sorry.
That's about right. No, that's about right. It's very, very little. And so, again, what are we as a local, regional, and national community doing to make sure that our kids, our young people, the future of our communities are safe? And what are the leaders in our communities? I tell people, if you're mayor or your city council person or the governor or whoever cannot tell you what they are doing to make your community safer for kids, they can't tell you what the laws are when there is a sexual predator caught, they don't deserve to have your vote or your support.
I agree with you. It's that big of a problem. And, it makes me think about what went on with the Epstein case as far as how big it is. Like, what are the reasons why it seems to be hidden and swept under the rug? Like that case, Ghislaine Maxwell is in jail. She's been sentenced. We've been through her trial, and yet there's no list of names. Nobody knows who was involved in this. I find that stunning.
Well, I think, in my personal, Andy, opinion, that is going to be a tool used at some point. There's some leverage in that, either for her or for other people, and the fact that she should have gotten up to 65 years for the counts that she was actually convicted of, and somehow it got whittled down to 20. That's phenomenally disturbing to me as well. But you're right. The names, everyone complicit, just like with Epstein. I heard an interview shortly after that case broke on his end, and one of the moms said, well, my daughter was only a third captain for Epstein and Maxwell, so she shouldn't have to go to jail.
Excuse me?
Yes, exactly. I don't care what kind of captain you are. Now, if that girl was drugged or coerced or whatever, but at some point you know that what you're doing or what you're doing to others is not right. Okay? And even if she couldn't escape, the point is somebody needed to speak up. And we are not the courageous society we used to be, where when we saw a human wrong, Melanie, or we saw somebody being oppressed or hurt, somebody usually would speak up at some point or step in. And we don't do that anymore.
That's exactly right. Nobody steps in for any, I shouldn't say nobody, but many people just don't. And if you do, nowadays you're the one who ends up being in trouble. For saying something. We live in a mind your own business kind of culture. And even when we see something wrong that's going on with another person, we keep to ourselves. We don't want to say anything. We don't want people to be upset with us, which is not a good way to be.
Exactly, because at some point it comes back around, the cycle of life, until somebody gets touched with the tragedy, or someone like Ann Hetch said in an interview with Larry King, she said, I was a perfect hider. I was raised to hide. I was raised to pretend, raised to always tell people everything was fine, even though I was in therapy for years. And she never told anyone. She had another personality. She had all these issues going on. This is the life of a true victim, where you cannot outrun the shame. And because no one really listened or dug down deeper or held people accountable in her life, tragedy happened.
That is the saddest thing ever. We're up against a break. You're listening to Money Talk with Melanie. We're speaking with Andi Buerger, and we're talking. She's the founder of Voices Against Trafficking and also Beulah's Place. We'll talk a little bit about that in the next segment. But we're talking about sex trafficking and the fact that it's 160 billion-dollar industry and really just trying to raise awareness. It creeps me out that it's a $160 billion industry is just insane. But anyway, you're listening to Money Talk with Melanie. We're on with Andi Buerger. We'll be back on the other side of the break.
Money Talk with Melanie, brought to you by MrCreditRepair.biz.
Money Talk with Melanie features lively discussions of a wide range of global, domestic, and kitchen table financial topics. Money Talk with Melanie on 98.7 The Coast.
Welcome back to Money Talk with Melanie. This hour we're speaking with Andi Buerger. She's the founder of Voices Against Trafficking and Beulah's Place. And we were just discussing how hidden human trafficking seems to be in all of its forms. I want to ask you about the Epstein case, just a little more about the Epstein case. You were saying that maybe perhaps it was surely used as a negotiating tool for her to probably get less time, right? But
well, that would be my assumption, yes.
I would think so too, but then what? What happens with the next step? Like, why are we not hearing about people being prosecuted?
Well, that's a great question for the Justice Department. I would love to hear their answer, but I think that we would just get put off again. I think that there are definitely names on there that people don't want to be revealed, and people are willing to do whatever it takes to keep those names under wraps. And whatever we may think, the public has a right to know because they are complicit or possibly involved in those activities, and why aren't they being accountable for that? Just like anyone who was complicit in opening the door to flying the plane, to whatever it takes, to transport these girls and to be part of that whole ring. Everyone that is involved needs to be accountable.
Indeed. And where are I think we know the common kinds of human trafficking, right? Like, okay, you traffic a girl into prostitution and somebody pays for that girl. Are there other, like, lesser known forms of trafficking that are money making or part of that industry that we're not aware of?
Well, I think it depends. Some cities or some rings may operate differently, but let me give you a couple things that might help. So, for example, an ex-Navy SEAL friend of mine who used to help break up rings on the Internet and also in other countries, he said, Andi, there are actually recruiters on college campuses. For example, a young man could get paid anywhere, and this was a few years ago, $1,500 to $2,000 just to target a girl, maybe at a party, maybe she looks insecure, or she's not as popular, or she doesn't seem to be attached to any group, and then gain her trust, whether it's, let's get her a Coke or a beer, depending on if they're in high school or college or whatever. And so that person will develop a trust and then invite them to a party, right? And there's no party, but they're being invited. And, of course, who at that age doesn't want to be invited to a party and maybe bring a friend with them? And so that recruiter then gets young people involved in a ring that is set up by others, and they get paid very well for it. So even on college campuses, kids are making money by getting other kids involved. The other end of the spectrum is usually we think of drugs as the number one illegal enterprise in America, and it probably still is, although human trafficking has certainly made its way into the number two spot. But the gang members, think about this. If you have to make drugs, you have to get ingredients, you have to process, you have to create it, you have to market it, you have to have distributors, you have all these ways to get caught. But let's say you're an enterprising young man or woman and you decide to bring your partner or invite your girlfriend or boyfriend to a party with your friends, and he or she gets there and suddenly there are 20 people waiting to buy them and use them that night. Yeah, exactly, because the average human trafficking victim is sold 20 to 25 times. Now, that person, whether it's male or female, because boys are trafficked too, they're not going to run home and say, hey, guess what happened to me last night, right? And so there's no arrest, there's no reporting, there is nothing but shame, guilt, and humiliation for the victim, who will never be the same. And then the next night, it's a whole other group.
Oh, my Lord. That's just the most awful That is awful, and I'm sure that happens. I'm certain that is the way that happens. I think of the little girl who, I can't remember what state, but she was at a basketball game or some kind of professional sporting event.
Yes,
and
yes.
she was picked up in the restroom.
Absolutely, and I'm sure that dad regrets that moment, where he thought it was perfectly safe for his 15-year-old girl to run up to the ladies' room and come back down. And I am not telling people to police their kids. I'm simply asking people and trying to create the awareness, have conversations, especially about public places, whether it's a Little League game or it's, the Mavericks that she was at, because there were 8 people involved in that abduction of one girl. Okay, so the ones that took her, the ones that transported her, where she ended up, and really, truly, only by the grace of God was she found. That was amazing that she was found in 11 days, but those 11 days have forever changed her life and her family, should she decide to have one down the road.
Absolutely, for sure. And that, I thought to myself, I'm sure that father had no idea, but I wouldn't leave my kid alone anywhere, ever. Just
exactly.
You hate to be dramatic, but honestly, and particularly a teenage girl, like just why would you do that at this point?
Well, and here's the thing. We know that preteen teenagers, let's just say from 10 years up, you got hormones, you got distractions, you got, kids looking at all this stuff. They're maybe at a big event and they want to feel independent, and it doesn't seem like a big deal to let a few of them go off by themselves. But it's not just one kid that'll get snatched. It can be a number of them, or they'll get separated. A predator will try to separate the weakest one out of the group, basically. So it's not like you have to go into the bathroom with them, but maybe you stand outside. Let the predator know that there is somebody watching. And if it's not your own child, maybe you're taking your nieces or nephews, or, you have a party or something at one of these events. You have to be aware that the predators are smarter than you are.
That is for sure. That is for certain, that the predators are smarter than you. So what can we do about this? How can we, as common folk, what can we do to crush this, to fight against it? How can we do it? It just seems such an overwhelming problem.
It definitely is, and it can be to the point where some people will just turn away and say, it's too big, I can't deal with it. And please don't do that. Go to voicesagainsttrafficking.com before you do that, and put the hotlines and helplines in your phone today. And if you have children old enough to understand what those numbers are for, in case they see something, you can call those numbers. There are trained people on the other end. There are peers to peer. There's everybody is on those hotlines is trained to help you get the communication, get things happening if there's something that you're not sure of. Better to report. If somebody had said anything in my life, Melanie, I have no idea, where I'd be now. I mean, I certainly wouldn't have had to go through the pain. I certainly would not have tried to take my life 3 times before the age of 17. So put the numbers in your phone. Explain to the kids in your life that are old enough to know that what they're for. There's suicide prevention. There's human trafficking, a suspected victim, line. There's all kinds of missing children. All that stuff is on our site. Another thing, open conversations. Find out what your school or what your daycare or what your social clubs are doing to get the word out. Just get the word out that it exists, and then bring in speakers, whether it's me or some of our members on Voices or anywhere in your community. We can all Zoom pretty much or get on internet, and we would be happy to share whatever we can. Have your church host a speaker so that church members are aware, especially if they have a school, or a daycare or vacation Bible school or whatever going on. We all need to do a better job at protecting our kids. We protect our stuff in storage units. We put fences around our yards, so why aren't we doing more to help these kids?
That is for sure. And are there things that, as average adults, when we're looking around in the classroom, teachers, for example, or in an airport or places where we travel, are there signs, are there things that we should be looking at? How do we know what to report? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I get that, definitely. And I know that it's a little difficult sometimes for folks to say, well, I don't want to cause any trouble for anyone, but really you're doing someone a favor, even if you're wrong, by at least trying to be aware and bringing that up. So here are a couple things. I never gave direct eye contact to people, especially if I was with a predator. And usually there's a handler, a controller, somebody with the teen. One example, there was a lady with 2 young gals on an airplane. One of our members noticed that these girls were probably 12 or 13, but they had like $100 nail jobs, manicures, and they had clothes that looked a little too old for them, and they looked different, they acted different, they weren't allowed to speak to, the flight attendants or do anything. The woman in charge of them handled all of that, okay? And so the person reported it to a flight attendant, which is what they did. The flight attendant reported it possible to TSA, and it ended up that woman was trying to traffic those 2 girls out of the country.
Oh, my word. And it's a good thing somebody spoke up.
Absolutely. Another one of our members in Georgia, she noticed that this man in his 40s had a teeny tiny baby with him, a newborn. Didn't seem to know what to do with it. It was all covered up with some kind of blanket or coat or something. She thought it was strange, so she actually did a quote-unquote selfie, pretending to do a selfie, got his picture, got the flight that he was on, kind of stood behind and noticed what flight he was getting on, and within 4 hours, Voices Against Trafficking, because of this member, we had Homeland Security involved in that.
Wow.
So you see, it's just something usually doesn't look right, doesn't feel right. Maybe you see an older gentleman with a girl that's dressed differently. She's not really giving him the kind of contact or the kind of emotion, look or kind of walk that your child would give you, right? You might be warm, cuddly, snuggly, whatever, or you might, if they're older, have a little bit more relaxed, but victims are not going to do anything to cause their handler to hurt them or to take them away from an opportunity to get free.
Yikes. That's awful. Okay, so before we close out this hour, Andi Buerger, thank you so much for being on the show. Tell people where they can reach you, where they can avail themselves of your services, and find out more information about this important topic.
Absolutely. VoicesAgainstTrafficking.com. We're a 501c3 nonprofit. We rely on support, and we rely on you to let us know what you need so we can help you do a better job and give you the tools, like our book, as a good handbook to open up conversations. I encourage you to converse with your kids or the children in your life, not to police them, but to protect them. So VoicesAgainstTrafficking.com. You can email me directly, and I will be happy to help in any way I can.
Excellent. Thank you so much for being on the show, Andi. I hope I catch up with you soon.
Absolutely. You got it. Thank you for having me back.
Thank you. You're listening to Money Talk with Melanie. We'll be back after the break.
Money Talk with Melanie, brought to you by MrCreditRepair.biz.
Money Talk with Melanie features entrepreneurs, CEOs, and politicos who are experts in their fields. Money Talk with Melanie. Money Talk with Melanie on 98.7 The Coast.
Welcome back to Money Talk with Melanie. If you missed the first hour, we had the one and only Andi Buerger on. She's the founder of Voices Against Trafficking, and we discussed the $160 billion human trafficking industry, which some $99 billion is sex trafficking, and just what we can do to look out for our children, and actually not just children, for women, children, boys, men, anybody who is trafficked, and how we can crush that industry. It's insidious. So if you missed that, shame on you. You will be able to catch that as Money Talk with Melanie is posted as a podcast here on 98.7 The Coast website, or anywhere where you find your podcasts, on Apple Podcasts, Podbean, any of those, even on YouTube, any of those mechanisms. Also, if you follow me on social media, I always post links there, at Money Talk Mel on Twitter and at Money Talk with Melanie on my Facebook page, and on Instagram as well, at Melanie T. Collette. Our guest for the second hour is Jayson Thornton. He's a certified financial planner and host of the YouTube show Pocket Watching with JT. And he's going to expose fraudulent financial influencers. In particular, what he brought to my attention are some black influencers that are targeting black communities. We've discussed before, people don't like to hear this, but I've had guests come on and talk about it before, that there's a certain lack of trust, right, among certain communities when it comes to people who do not look like them. I would say that that is prevalent in the African American community. So you would look to somebody who looks like you to get advice. And that's the case with some financial influencers. Unfortunately, some of them have proven to be unreliable, and so I'm having JT on as a warning, not only to brown and black people, but to anybody, because all of these rules that we're going to go over, and red flags, if you will, as far as influencers are concerned, really could be red flags for any influencer that you might be following. And when I say influencer, we'll talk more about what we mean by that. But I'm excited to have Jayson Thornton on so we can issue a warning about just being careful who you follow on social media and who you take advice from. Money Talk with Melanie, of course, has fabulous experts that are on every week, and you feel free to vet them too. And if you see anybody that's creepy, I usually do a check when I have guests on, and some people have not made it to the air because the results of that check was not awesome. So I do try to keep high quality experts here on Money Talk with Melanie, and so far so good. But before we bring JT on, there's another thing that I want to talk about real quick that I thought was interesting. If you pay attention to the foreign markets, to our trade deals, to things like that in the economy, you'll find that people are trying to do less and less business with China because China has been misbehaving, and because the trade deal has been volatile and dicey at best with the United States. But one of the things that I noticed was an article it was from an outlet called the Nikkei.com, and they talked about how Apple is starting to build their Apple Watch and MacBooks in Vietnam instead of China. And the whole goal is that they are trying to get away from building things in China. And I just thought that was very interesting because Apple as an organization has been very kind of pro-China. So I'm wondering what the impetus is for this really. According to the article that I read, the impetus is COVID restrictions, the severe COVID restrictions that go on in China, and of course the volatile relationship that the United States has had with China, particularly the trade deals and how they were altered during the Trump administration. So they are looking to provide geographical balance in how they produce things. It would be really nice, FYI, if they would produce things in the United States. But of course, I think that instead of being, some $2,000, our iPhones would probably be $5,000 if it was all produced in the United States. But I was just surprised to see that out of Apple because they seem to have been so pro-China. But money talks, and that's the thing. So once they see their bottom line being affected by the tensions between the United States and China, and seeing that it would be more economically favorable to produce things in Vietnam, that is where they are. So I just thought that was an interesting tidbit. Maybe lower the prices there, those of you at Apple. Like feel free to pass that savings on to the consumer. Just saying. I don't know if I brought this up before, and I had this in my notes, and I don't think I ever talked about it, but this is important, that Equifax has been sued over what has been called by CBS News as erroneous credit scores sent for millions of Americans. That is absolutely not a good look. They were slapped with a lawsuit because they have been giving out incorrect credit scores. And that is this past spring for millions of customers. You know how badly that can affect you? Think you're in a car dealership applying for a loan to get a car, and your credit score, comes back 650 instead of 850? That's problematic. That's going to cost you a lot more money. And Equifax has apparently had a real big problem doing that. And now they said that it was a coding error and that it only affected customer scores as much as 20 points in either direction, which is great if you have a high credit score, right? But if you do not, that 20 points can affect you. And, I think a lot of people, you may or may not be aware that your credit score directly affects your interest rate. That's going to be on any loan that you take. So every point counts. And you want to make sure that your credit score is accurate, but Equifax is being sued for actually being inaccurate when it comes to their credit scores, which is completely insane. So just keep your eye on that. You're listening to Money Talk with Melanie. I'm your host, Melanie Collette. And when we come back from the break, we will speak with Jayson Thornton, also known as JT, and he has a show called Pocket Watching with JT. We're going to talk to him about fraudulent financial influencers, and we'll be back in a moment.
Money Talk with Melanie, brought to you by MrCreditRepair.biz.
Money Talk with Melanie features lively discussions of a wide range of global, domestic, and kitchen table financial topics. Money Talk with Melanie on 98.7 The Coast.
Welcome back to the second hour of Money Talk with Melanie. My guest this hour is Jayson Thornton. He is a financial advisor and host of the host of the YouTube show and podcast, Pocket Watching with JT, which is a call-in financial talk show. JT is a fiscal conservative helping everyday people get out of debt and find financial freedom. And without further ado, I'd like to welcome Jayson Thornton to the show.
Melanie, thank you so much. First off, I appreciate the opportunity to come on your show and really talk about a topic that is extremely important, especially for me. I'm a certified financial planner, and this topic is extremely important.
Let me tell you something. I was when you sent those clips to me, and for the audience, we'll talk about that. We'll be hearing those clips in a few minutes, and I listened to them. I was legitimately heated. I emailed you, and I'm like, I'm so mad right now.
Right.
I'm doing show prep, and I am really mad. It's ridiculous. And I think, as I was doing research for this segment of the show, I found out this is not just happening in Black and brown communities. It's happening in many communities, but the thing is, you're really taking advantage when you target Black and brown communities because there's already a distrust of outsiders. Like, there's some Black people who just prefer to go to other Black people. We can have a whole show on whether or not that's okay and the reasons for that. But that's a fact. So I feel like these people are taking advantage.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, to me personally, my personal view, this is a version of affinity fraud. These people that are being promoted as Black financial influencers, the truth is many of them are convicts. Many of them have been convicted of fraud or drug crimes. These people would never, ever be allowed anywhere near the financial services industry based on their criminal past. But they're being passed off as Black financial influencers online because there is no regulation going on, and you have a company like NBC that is promoting these people as if it's good information that they're giving out. And they have partnerships with a lot of celebrities, and it's absolutely ridiculous, and it's hurting the consumers of this information.
That is absolutely right. And the thing is, you're taking advantage of people not knowing. For example, one of the things that you just said about being a financial planner is that being a financial planner, you can't have a criminal past at all.
No.
Like, you go through a stream. I'm not a financial planner, but I have a life and health producer's license, which is very similar, right, set of rules as far as the financial industry, which is very regulated. And you can't have a criminal past of any kind.
No, and especially being convicted of fraud. I mean, there's people who, you talk about hard drug crimes. You're talking about people who were convicted of theft and fraud and identity theft. These people are now all of a sudden financial influencers, and they're getting like ridiculous deals with these celebrities and these corporations. You're talking about like Cash App and big companies that are basically funneling and using these so-called influencers to get at their audience, their followers, who, let's be honest, are mostly financial illiterate people. And they're all sharing on the profits of taking advantage of these people.
And it's a terrible, terrible thing. So before we get ahead of ourselves a little bit, when we talk about an influencer, who are we talking about? When we say somebody's an influencer or a financial influencer, who do we mean?
It's hilarious because it's such a nebulous term. It can mean whatever they want it to mean.
Right.
I can give you a couple examples. We're talking about people who claim that they know how to help you get your credit fixed, and they have maybe 200,000 followers on Instagram or TikTok. They're a financial influencer because they talk about stuff that's financial, but they have absolutely no background, be it educational, certifications, or licenses. And I'm telling you, time after time after time, I've documented where a lot of this stuff is either bad advice, but really at the extreme point, it's fraudulent advice. They're teaching people how to scam.
Yes, one of those was outright. One of the clips you sent me was an outright scam. I'm like,
Yeah.
You cannot. You're telling people to break the law. Can
Yeah.
do you recall which one that was that I'm referring to? Because I'm going to ask our producer to call that one up right now because I want the audience to hear the kind of fraudulent advice we're referring to.
Sure. I believe we're referring to where it's a clip where a woman is calling in to a show, a very huge show. We're talking about Earn Your Leisure. For those of you who don't know, you're uninitiated to this world and this space of financial literacy online. Earn Your Leisure is the biggest online podcast show that has the hearts and minds of urban America, supposedly to teach them financial literacy.
And what does he tell? What's he tell her to do? Is this the one about the student loans?
No, this is the one where the woman calls up and she requests, how do I get a big credit limit on my credit card?
Okay, so let's listen to the advice that's given.
So what is it that I should do to go and get like a credit limit that's up there? Because I need to.
You want to put your income, when you do it, put your income at $150,000, right? And you either pay $2,000 or $0 a monthly on living expenses. And that's what'll get you. So put $150K as your income on there, and your living expenses is $2,000, or you put $0, and that's what's going to kick you your large limit, especially if you got over a 730 credit score.
I mean, I'm telling you, every time I hear that, I feel physical pain because, one, this woman, as innocent as she is, she's just calling in to one of the biggest platforms that is available for her to get good financial information, and she's being told by someone who she believes is a qualified professional to commit bank fraud. When you fill out a credit application and you put down fraudulent information, like I have a really, really high income that I don't really have, and I have a really, really low expenses where I really don't have, you are committing bank fraud, a federal crime.
Yes, you do jail time, like jail. Like
Yes.
What? When I heard that, I was like, what just happened? And the thing that really kills me about this, and I'm so glad you brought this to my attention because it never, believe it or not, never occurred to me that people would actually do this. You know, I've had my podcast for some time now, and I try to be so careful with what I say to people, and I tell them where I'm getting my information from. And these people are on video saying this crazy stuff.
See, but here's the difference between someone like yourself, who's a qualified professional, you're ethical, and the other platforms and podcasts where a lot of this information is coming on. The gentleman that you just heard explain how to commit bank fraud, he refers to himself as him 500. That's his name. him 500.
Really?
His real name is Marcus, so I'm going to refer to him as Marcus because I'm not a child. Okay? So Marcus earlier already admitted that he pays $50,000 worth of podcast payola to get on these platforms. Not only do they do podcast payola, they also, because this guy, Marcus, a.k.a. him 500, he sells a financial literacy course where he basically teaches all of this fraud stuff in the course. The course costs thousands of dollars. So not only does he give the podcast host $50,000 to get on the show, when they sell the course during the show to their audience, he gives them a code letting them know that they came based on this show, and the podcast host gets, from what I'm told, up to 50% of the sales of the course. So they got money coming through the front door and the back door, and no one's checking to see if this information is legitimate or fraudulent.
Okay, I know dead air is really bad on the radio, but every now and then a guest says something where I'm rendered speechless, which anybody who knows me knows that is very difficult to do. But I'm just sitting here with my mouth open. Okay, so we know about, I think if you're not in the media, you probably don't know that sometimes that happens. They have something called earned media, which is because of who you are, because of your background, because of your expertise, whatever, you'll be on TV or on the radio for free. You don't have to pay anybody. But then there's unearned media where people actually pay their booker or whomever to get them in certain spaces in the media. That's an FYI for people that, not everybody you see on TV is there legitimately. Sometimes they pay to be there. But what you're talking about, I'm used to I can get you on this news program for $100. Not.
This is a totally different world. We're talking about $50,000 up front to get on a podcast that was called $1 Million Worth of Game. This podcast has probably over 1 million subscribers. They interview big celebrities. We're talking about from Shaquille O'Neal, athletes, entertainers, actors, all of this stuff. He paid $50,000 to get on that show. And the thing about it is, hey, if you're going to do that, okay. But according to the FTC, you are supposed to notify your audience that this is a sponsored segment. This is an ad. But I'm telling you, I've got clips. These clips you don't have, but I have clips of where the host of that show, they are giving you the most amazing introduction of how they met this person and why they brought them on the show. But they never admitted that they were given $50,000. That is deceptive to the audience.
That is absolutely deceptive. And not only that, as a financial advisor, as part of your practice, that is a big no-no. If you were right?
Can't do it whatsoever. My license would be gone. The CFP board would immediately rip those 3 letters from the back of my name. It would be the worst day of my life. But once again, we have, these lefty, celebrities who promote all this stuff of liberalism and they're supposed to have the moral high ground, but they constantly do things like this that are targeting the minority communities that they're supposed to be championing.
For sure, and it is it's maddening. I was so mad when I heard the first one. I'd love to hear. I'm going to have our producer, Miss Alyssa, play another example of some fraudulent advice.
Sure.
You recommend paying off student loans all at once or weekly payments?
Never pay off student loans.
Never pay off student loans.
It's still going to be on your credit after you pay the student loan off.
Damn. Really?
Yeah. I'm in the credit game.
Yeah.
Everybody hit me up. They be like, I had just paid my student loans off, but why does it still show on my credit? Because you didn't supposed to really pay it off.
Oh, wow. See, I paid my joint off. I didn't even know it was still on my... Man,
I mean, you could have took the same money, and just had it removed. Yeah, you would have still owed it, but are you going back to college?
No.
Okay, then.
Oh.
It's only for if you're trying to go back to school, then it was like, oh, well, you still owe a student loan. It only matters if you're going back to school.
See, no, that's a real scam.
Yeah,
Holy
I didn't know
smokes.
that.
Oh, my God.
It's the audacity. It's the audacity for me.
I know he sounds so confident in the gibberish that he's speaking. So just to give a little bit of context, this is the Fresh and Fit podcast, a podcast that's already known, if you're aware, is already known for controversy and just ridiculous antics that goes on during this podcast. It's very
known in the manosphere, which I have.
Yes.
I have some big fans of the manosphere on my social media, and when I saw them, I was like, "Ooh, I cannot wait till this post is a podcast," because they are getting all the smoke. But continue.
Yes, and the individual who was giving this horrible advice, another man with a weird name, he calls himself Bandman Kevo. I'm not exactly sure what his real name is, his full real name, but I'm pretty sure his first name is really Kevin. So I'm going to refer to him as Kevin. Kevin is a convicted criminal for fraud. The reason, in my estimation, the reason why he's giving this horrible advice about never paying off your student loans and that you don't have to worry about paying off your student loans because the only way it can affect you is if you want to go back to school. That is 100% incorrect. Not paying off your student loans can cause horrible damage to your credit score. You can get your tax refunds offset. You can get your wages garnished. There's an almost unlimited amount of things that can happen, and you can't get it removed through bankruptcy. That's the worst advice you can give. But my estimation as to why I believe he would give such bad advice is because one of the top selling things and ways that he makes his money is so-called fixing people's credit.
But you can't
so
do that. You can't do that with the
Fed. He's saying don't pay your student loans. Pay me to get it off your credit. And for people who are unaware of how you fix credit in this fraudulent way, you basically lie and say that your identity was stolen. You're not the person who borrowed this money. And if the credit agency doesn't respond in time, it's off your credit.
Okay, but
That's
also you're going to go to jail for fraud when you get found out. Like what? what are we doing?
It's ridiculous. I'm telling you, that's it. I feel physical pain when I hear this stuff, and knowing that people are making not a little bit of money, a lot of money by passing off this fraudulent stuff as financial advice.
And you know what's sad about it is, we know that there's a gap, right, in financial literacy. Now, people talk about, the racial gaps in financial literacy. I would submit to you that many of the gaps are socioeconomic, not necessarily racial, and that that black and brown people are just caught up in that socioeconomic situation, and that's why they are affected, by this kind of thing and by the gaps in financial literacy. But for people who should know better, you can't tell me that they don't know better. That some of these people, and even if you don't know better, you're still guilty.
Right. And what you're saying, it makes so much sense. I just want to touch on it real quick because the reason why minority communities, in my estimation, they're more targeted towards what's going on, it's because of a breakdown of a value system, right?
I hate to cut you off, JT, but we're up against the break. Hold on tightly to that thought because it's going to be a whammy, and I want to make sure you get it in.
Yes, ma'am.
You're listening to Money Talk with Melanie. I'm your host, Melanie Collette. We have Jayson Thornton on, otherwise known as JT, of the Pocket Watching with JT podcast, and we are exposing fraudulent financial influencers. Open your ears and listen up because you need to know who they are, what they're saying, and how to stay away from them. We'll be back on the other side of the break.
Money Talk with Melanie, brought to you by MrCreditRepair.biz.
Money Talk with Melanie features entrepreneurs, CEOs, and politicos who are experts in their fields. Money Talk with Melanie. Money Talk with Melanie on 98.7 The Coast.
We're back with Money Talk with Melanie, and our guest this hour is Jayson Thornton, and we're talking about how to identify fraudulent influencers online, particularly in the financial sphere. There are just many really popular podcasts and YouTube shows, but there's a legion, apparently, of fraudsters that are not only just targeting people who are just unaware or financially naive, but particular audiences such as Black and Brown communities, because these are the audiences where they pay to be on these people's shows in order to scam people in their community. It's a very sad situation. So before the break, JT, you were getting into why you think they're okay with kind of targeting our own community, which is kind of crazy.
Absolutely. The issue is liberalism does not promote traditional values. And what that leads to is almost a worship of celebrities and drug culture. And this makes victims of our community that say they're more than happy to get their financial advice, to get their health advice and their legal advice from felons, and there's no need to seek out professional help because it's the members of the drug culture and celebrities. They have a higher place in their life than actual boring old professionals.
Boring people like you and myself who have these certifications and degrees and whatnot. You don't want to listen to us.
Yeah, we're lame. In their words, we're lame. We're not cool. We don't have the drip. We don't have the things, the material things that draw their eyes, that make them susceptible to this type of blatant fraud.
Oh, you're so right. And I try to tell my students this, and the other incarnation of my life, I teach financial literacy. And one of the things that I tell my students all the time is that when you see someone with a lot of stuff, don't assume that they are rich or wealthy. In fact, you can almost always guarantee that what they are is in a lot of debt.
Yes. I have been a financial advisor for years, and I can tell you that is one of the truest statements that I have ever heard, because whenever a client walks in my door and they've got all the right clothes and the right watch and jewelry on, I know they're here because they're in debt and they need my help.
Exactly. But it's kind of too late then. Or maybe they listen to one of these crazy fraudsters that are on YouTube or anywhere on the internet. I want to play the last clip, which this one's a little longer than the other two, but I want the audience to hear just another example of the kinds of just bad information that's being given out by these people.
I don't know. It always seems like, I don't know, you feel like I'm being sold on something.
So let me try to sell you that.
Okay, let's do it.
All right. So say if I make $100,000, right, in profit this month, and I buy a policy, I front load the policy, whole life policy with $100,000, right? So now I put it into an investment that I don't have to pay taxes on. So I take this profit that I'm going to be taxed on, and I put it into a life insurance policy. Instead of putting the money in a bank, I put the money into another savings account, which is an insurance policy. So now I'm not paying taxes on it.
Hold on. I profit $100,000 in a month. I take the whole $100,000, let's say, and I put it into a life insurance policy. I don't get taxed on $100,000 that just came to me?
Nah, because you invested it.
Sir.
Insurance policy.
Okay, so $100,000 that I just made, the government can't tax me on the $100,000.
Right, because it's invested in insurance policy.
Because it's invested in insurance policy.
Sir.
Absolutely ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous.
Now, all right, now, please tell the audience what is wrong with that.
All right, so here we go. Putting money into a insurance policy, even one with a cash value, that is in no way considered a business deduction. If you are a beneficiary of the policy or someone close to you is going to be the beneficiary of the policy. That is just not how it works. Now, if you have a larger company and you choose to provide as a employee benefit to people who you are not closely tied to an insurance policy, that could be considered a business deduction. But word for word, the way that this individual explained how to not be taxed on $100,000 is absolutely not the way it could ever be done. It's another example of someone getting on a very large platform, most likely paying their way to get there, and it's like they want to one-up the the last guy who was on the show. They try to figure out what's the most exciting thing that I can say to make it seem like I'm giving people a great value in this secret thing. And here's another telltale sign of a scammer. They always talk about how this is what the rich white folks do. They'll make it seem as if these are the secrets that no one's willing to tell you. But these are not secrets. The reason why a qualified professional will never tell you to do this is because it's fraud. It's not because we don't want to help you. It's because it's illegal.
Yes, that is exactly it. And the thing that's really nuts about this is that there are things, there's strategies and financial moves that the rich and the wealthy make that you probably don't know about that are perfectly legal. Like, that's the thing that gets me, is that this is so unnecessary. You could just as easily be teaching people the truth, and yet these people are choosing to lie and take advantage of their own communities. It is really maddening.
Right. The problem with that is teaching the truth, teaching the things, because, I have a call-in financial talk show. People call in and they tell me their basic financial situation, and I give them financial tips to help them live a better life, right? The problem is it's not sexy. See, the audience that consumes this type of information, this type of fraudulent information, they don't want to hear you need to make sure that you have an emergency savings fund between 3 to 6 months. We want to make sure that you're paying down as much debt as possible. You want to make sure that you are investing somewhere around 10 to 15% of your monthly income so that you can prepare for retirement. See, that's boring. They want to hear, if you put the money in this, you'll get a foot to 300%. They want to hear the most exciting, get rich quick, no work, no money down. I can get you a business credit card with $200,000 even though you don't really have a business. Melanie, there are even step-by-step how to get a fraudulent PPP loan on TikTok, on Instagram, on YouTube, that these very so-called black financial influencers that CNBC was promoting, they were teaching people how to commit PPP loan fraud. That's why it was so widespread.
And I saw a report today about this very thing, and the things that people were doing, well, first of all, they're taking advantage of the fact that our government is completely inept and don't know what they're doing. But we could do a whole show on that. Because the things that people were getting away with were ridiculous, like creating these fake businesses and putting a legitimate business's address on it, and the government just not catching up with it at all. Saying you have thousands of employees that you don't have. These people are not afraid to go to jail. See, I'm afraid to go to jail. I look cute in orange, don't get me wrong, but I'm not going to jail for the foolishness. Money Talk with Melanie is a huge media conglomerate with 5,000 employees. Send me my check. Are you insane? Are you insane?
No, I'm not built for jail. I'm a person that, listen, I don't care what it is. I'm going to do the best I can to do it the right way. Because here's one of the things that really breaks my heart. One of the leading pitches that these influencers give, they always try to place their audience in a position of victimhood, about how there's no way that you can make it in America unless you cheat. If you're not cheating, you're not trying, and that's how the rich folk got rich. They cheated, and so I'm now teaching you how to cheat the system. And the true thing is, we live in the greatest country in the world that gives you the greatest opportunity ever in the history of men to actually create and build wealth. But when they're being force-fed this never-ending supply of victimhood, they will never actually step into the potential of what they could do. That's heartbreaking.
You are preaching. You are so right. And you're just making emotional arguments instead of critical thinking arguments or intellectual arguments. And the last thing you want to do with your finances is make emotional decisions.
I think that's day one.
I'll give you Exhibit A, my first divorce. Don't do that. Don't make emotional financial decisions. It will be to your detriment. Don't do it. So we're at the close of the hour. I can't believe how quickly that went by.
Wow.
Tell people how to find you, how to avail themselves of your advice, subscribe to your show. Very important. Tell them all that good stuff.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the opportunity. If you want to get more of my content, you can easily go to YouTube and just search Pocket Watching with JT, or you can go to my personal website. It is www.pocketwatcher.net. All of my links of how you can get to my content. And if you have a money question that you want answered, you can easily call into the show, or you can go to my website, submit your question via email, and I will answer it during the show.
Excellent. Thank you so much, JT. That was fabulous. I appreciate you so much and everything that you're doing. Let's make sure we stay in touch and promote each other's stuff on all the social media things.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I love what you do. I am a big fan. Thank you.
Oh, thanks very much. I appreciate it. You're listening to Money Talk with Melanie. We'll be right back.
Money Talk with Melanie, brought to you by MrCreditRepair.biz.
Money Talk with Melanie on 98.7 The Coast.
And we're back. I want to thank, who do I want to thank? I want to thank Alyssa. I just drew a complete blank. I want to thank Alyssa for working the board this evening. I want to thank my guests, Andi Buerger, Jayson Thornton, who did so very well. I also want to thank MrCreditRepair.biz for sponsoring this evening's show. And I want to thank you, our listeners, for listening to Money Talk with Melanie. If you're listening to it live or if you're listening to it as a podcast, we completely appreciate you. Please remember to tune in next Wednesday from 7 to 9 for more great Money Talk with Melanie guests. And remember, all of this is important because after all, it's your money.